Okay, so I'm really excited to be doing another edition here of Facebook Live. Today we're going to be talking about genetics and thyroid problems. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be being joined by Dr. John Thomas, but he will be joining us next week. And so my name is Dr. Joel Rosen, and we are going to be talking to you about why thyroid problems become overactive or underactive, autoimmune thyroid. What does MTHFR have to do with it? What's the relationship? What about Graves' disease or Hashimoto's? Is there a relationship to MTHFR and so forth? So that's what we're going to be talking about today. Dr. John Thomas and myself are the creators of Your Genetic Type. It evolved from starting out with the MTHFR crash course, which then evolved into Your Genetic Types Unlocked. And what we do is we believe that there are 7 core genetic types that really are indicative of the potential findings that you have, or the presentations that you have from being exhausted and fatigued and cold and not being able to lose weight or not being able to gain weight, infertility issues or pregnancy challenges or hormonal imbalances or brain fog and anxiety and depression and mood disorders. Ultimately, there's a host of chronic issues that are really plaguing and becoming an epidemic in our society, and we are looking for answers. We go to our doctor, we go to our traditional doctor, and they are doing their best to give us support. But a lot of the times what happens is your blood tests come back and they're normal. And the good news is doctor says to you, Mrs. Jones, your blood tests are normal. There's nothing to worry about. The bad news is that you feel like crap and there's a lot to worry about, and you want answers. You want specific insight as to what's going on. And ultimately, you don't want to have to medicate yourself when you know that potentially there's no answers in terms of what are you dealing with. And it becomes a real big problem. So then ultimately you go searching on your own and you look deeper and deeper, and you hear of this thing called genetic testing and or 23andMe or ancestry.com, or we like to do the functional genomic analysis. But suffice it to say, you have this ancestry test and you hear there's this thing called MTHFR, and then you find out you have 1 copy, which is called heterozygous, or you have 2 copies, which is called homozygous, and thus begins your trek or your pilgrimage into what the heck does this all mean? And then you go deep and deep and deep, and you're frustrated because you heard that you shouldn't be eating this or you shouldn't be eating that folic acid is bad, which it's true, and methylfolate is good, and all you need to do is take methylated B vitamins, and you do. And for some people, they do very, very well with that. For other people, they do very, very poorly with that, and they may feel a little bit better, but it now becomes whack-a-mole where you change one symptom for another symptom. So now instead of having fatigue, you have anxiety, or instead of having anxiety, you have brain fog, or instead of feeling cold, you feel too hot, and you become very, very frustrated. So that's where Dr. Thomas and I have come up with Your Genetic Type Unlocked course, where we believe there are 7 core genetic types. Now you can take a test. We have a test that we are actually working on digitizing and making it really straightforward. So all you need to do is fill in the question, the bubbles, and it will automatically score you and let you know, hey, you're a histamine type, or you're a weak cellular type, or you're a toxic accumulator. And you can get that free tool on yourgenetictype.com, and you go to the courses, and it's a free course, and it's going to give you a lot of wonderful information. But like I said, you're dealing with many, many problems. You're dealing with not just one problem today, in today's day and age, when we have an intake in our private practice and we have you fill out our questionnaires. There's a lot going on. There's focus, concentration, anxiety. I had someone the other day had 35 chief complaints, and not that they're an embellisher. I mean, they have these things going on, from brain fog to focus to concentration to anxiety to mood disorders to gastrointestinal disturbances to not handling their stressors the same way that they want to. Their circadian rhythm is off, so they're tired when they should be awake, and they're awake when they should be tired. They feel toxic, they have a lot of hormone imbalances. And where does the thyroid fit in? That's the amazing thing. And the thing about the thyroid is there's every cell in the body has a thyroid receptor. So if you think about your cardiovascular system, you think about your endocrine system, you think about your liver, you think about your bones, you think about your red blood cells, all of those things have a thyroid receptor. So if your thyroid is not working optimally, then it can have widespread impact. And that's what we're seeing. We're seeing people that are coming in with a variety of or a laundry list of symptoms. And then making matters worse is the traditional medical model is just not set up to understand the thyroid mechanics. And I think it's really important to give acknowledgement where acknowledgement is due. And there's this amazing doctor named Dr. Karazian, and he has come up with a course for health educators called Mastering the Thyroid. And I've taken this course, I think 3 or 4 times. And every time I take it, we get more and more information. And what I wanted to talk to you about is I want to explain to you the genetic tie-in and how does MTHFR deal with or relate to having a thyroid problem or having an autoimmune problem. And so what I want to do is I want to give you a different way of looking at this, because I'm sure you've learned in the thyroid, you've looked into the thyroid, and you know the basics, but you want to know what's the genetic component. And so what Dr. Karazian teaches is there's 10 steps to proper thyroid production or proper thyroid utilization, because there's a difference between the gland and how the gland produces the hormone, and then the periphery, how the periphery or the target tissues or the receptors that every single hormone or tissue in the body utilizes. There's a difference between the central phenomena of what's going on at the thyroid level to the peripheral phenomena. Is that actual hormone getting into the cell and impacting the body? And I think that's really important, because it's not. And when you just throw thyroid medication at it, unfortunately it becomes whack-a-mole, and you say, well, your TSH numbers are really low, so we got to boost it up. And you're not really correlating, well, how do you feel? Or, hey, your TSH levels are normal, but you feel like crap, and you're not correlating that either, because there's just so many mechanics that are going on. And I think it's really important to think about, well, what does the thyroid actually do? And most of us understand that it increases your basal metabolic rate, or it creates your metabolism. It helps to produce proteins. It helps to create sensitivity to catecholamines, meaning it helps with your stress response. And I think that's what you have to think of when we think about the endocrine system, is you have to think about the endocrine system is really our body's way to deal with stress, to be able to manage fight or flight, to be able to thrive, to be able to maintain homeostasis in your body, to be able to repair and rebuild and regenerate, to be able to be vital. And I think that's really important, because when you look at basically the basic mechanism of the body, the one fundamental truth is the cells have the ability to produce energy. And energy is used for life, to sustain your life, to be able to grow and reproduce and thrive and accomplish stressors and maintain a certain balance in your body. And when that's not happening, or there's a lot of stressors from the environment, you have to upregulate your endocrine system to be able to deal with those stressors. And because in today's day and age, there's way more stressors and environmental pollutants and chemicals and toxins and pesticides and sprays and hormones and antibiotics and heavy metals and medications and really crappy foods and vitamin deficiencies and not a lot of minerals in the soils, and fake foods and GMOs and a lot of chemicals in there. That's a very stressful event for the body, and that's going to impact the thyroid function. So anyways, now back to the original, why does the thyroid become underactive and overactive? And what's the story with autoimmune? Is there an MTHFR relationship like Graves' disease and Hashimoto's? You know, there is research that shows that 90% of or hypothyroid problems are autoimmune, meaning your own immune system is attacking the tissues or attacking the functioning of the thyroid to slow it down. And a lot of people will say, well, that's a broken mechanism. And I don't think it's a broken mechanism. I think it's the body's dysregulation and its body's fight or flight going awry, and trying its best to maintain and preserve your homeostasis by doing what it can to shut down feedback loops so that you don't deplete your energy sources. It's kind of like saying, well, I used to make a lot of money, and now that I don't go on vacations or buy extra tools or toys, my body is not functioning properly. No, I mean, right now your concern is keeping the lights on. And is that a problem with your physiology? Is that a problem with your spending habits? Not necessarily. That's just the reality. That's supply and demand, and you don't have the ability to go out to the Riviera because you're just getting by to keep the power lights on. So that's really important. So let's talk about the 10 metabolic steps, and then we could look at how the genetic types fit in, because I think it's really important to look at these 10 metabolic types, or 10 metabolic steps. So the first step is really the hypothalamus has to sense the stressor. And that has a lot to do with proper serotonin and dopamine activity in the hypothalamus. So it starts with serotonin and hypothalamus and dopamine activity or sensitivity in the hypothalamus. So let's talk about that in English. Why do we make serotonin and dopamine? Those are our neurotransmitters for excitatory and inhibitory functions in the body, like upregulating your stress response, adrenaline, pain, pleasure, feeling good, feeling content. This is something that your brain processes to be able to signal to your pituitary to make put your foot on the gas pedal or put your foot on the brake based on that communication and that feedback loop. So if you are an overstimulator, and meaning there are genetic types. One of the main types is an overstimulator type, where you're not effectively clearing out your excitatory neurotransmitters and it's staying around too long. What can happen is that can cause too much sensitivity in the hypothalamus, and that can create TSH impact. And or it can create, if you have the genetic susceptibility, the body's autoimmune response, whether it be a TSI antibody that speeds up the activity of the thyroid because the messages are telling it to, or it's the TPO antibodies to slow down the thyroid because it's being stuck in the on position because your serotonin and dopamine mechanics aren't clearing out effectively, and your body is breaking down. So let me explain that again. So there are 10 mechanics to a proper thyroid physiology, from the signaling in the brain to the cell, the end tissue being able, which every cell in the body has a receptor to be able to function properly. So muscle contraction, peristalsis and moving of food in the digestive tract, liver breakdown. I mean, everything has a thyroid receptor that needs to be able to function and produce energy. Think about thyroid, which is a paradigm shift for me. Think about thyroid as it basically brings oxygen to the cell and helps you produce ATP. So if the very first step has to do with serotonin and dopamine receptors and genetic susceptibilities in your ability to make or break serotonin effectively, can impact thyroid health. Does that make sense? And so we're giving you sort of an outside the box aha approach to this, where just traditional medicine is not equipped to understand all of this information, sit down and explain it to you for the time that it takes. Insurance is not going to reimburse it. And then lastly, they're going to be looking at a pharmaceutical approach to impact that, which unfortunately, when you think about motivation, a lot of the motivation has to do with the dollar sign. So anyways, don't want to go there. But then the next signaling relay step in the 10 mechanics is the pituitary function or the pituitary response. So you have the hypothalamus with the serotonin and dopamine, and that could be upregulated or downregulated depending on your genetic type if you're an overstimulator. And then there's the understimulator. So you clear out these neurotransmitters too quickly, or you don't make enough and there's not enough gas in the tank. All of the things we explain on yourgenetictype.com, that can also impact thyroid health and create a hypothyroid state as well. So very, very important to neurotransmitter testing, organic acid testing. Those are really, really great tests that we like to do, as well as the functional genomic analysis test. And these tests are now available on our website at yourgenetictype.com. When you purchase, you go to the shop, you go to the store, and then you could purchase the test. And included in that test will be the easy follow along guide to do the interpretation so that you can work through this on your own. So we're really building this site for you guys to be able to thrive and get your health back. So the pituitary response. So the pituitary can be wound up from insulin resistance, which isn't just a food problem, cytokine inflammation or immune triggers. Those are the main two that are going to impact that pituitary, as well as exogenous hormones. I mean, I see you guys, you know, you started off at 66 micrograms, now you're at 188 micrograms, and you're yelling at a deaf person louder. And what's that doing to the pituitary? And what's it doing to the thyroid binding sites that are being over bombarded with thyroid hormone? You're not looking at these 10 steps that are really, really important. So hopefully you're getting a lot of information with this. If you are, just give me sort of a thumbs up, sort of like a high five. If you're watching this in our Facebook page, great. It means you're a member. If you're not, then make sure you become a member of Your Genetic Type Facebook group. Make sure you follow us on Your Genetic Type YouTube page, and for sure, go take that free mini course on yourgenetictype.com. So the pituitary can be impacted from exogenous hormones like, you know, your thyroid hormones, and even other hormones like your Premarin and Pravera and your bioidenticals. All of that can impact the pituitary. So even though the hypothalamus is giving the proper signals through thyroid releasing hormone, your pituitary may be falling asleep behind the wheel and you're just yelling at that deaf person louder, kind of thing. The next thing we look at is that proper TPO activity. So now once TSH is released from the pituitary, is it stimulating the thyroid to produce thyroid tissue or T4? And TPO enzyme does that. And we'll see a lot of people that have TPO antibodies. And I believe that that has to do with a cell danger response, where the body is just like, hey, we don't have enough money in the bank to be able to go spend, and we got to shut down, and basically you're not allowed to take out any withdrawals because you don't have any baseline currency in there. That's the TPO antibodies. And you know, I don't think there's a specific gene that says, okay, here's the gene that makes you autoimmune for thyroid. And I think it's a shame when they look at your ANA antibodies and they don't look at the mechanics of everything. And then they'll do, you know, a bone marrow investigation, which I think is important, but you need to put all these puzzle pieces together. And from the TPO activity, you need proper iodine uptake into the thyroid. And a lot of people are deficient in iodine, or if we're eating such really crappy diets from the environmental nutritional deficiencies, or just eating fast foods, or eating on the go, or having a microbiome issue, so you're not absorbing a lot of your nutrients, that's going to impact your thyroid too. So when we look at your genetic type, and we talked about being an overstimulator and understimulator, or a toxic accumulator, what happens a lot of the times is it's the epigenetic factors, or what we say, the cars on the highway that create the problems with the highway. So we look at the gene SNPs. If you have a copy of one gene SNP, it means you're heterozygous. If you have two copies, it means you're homozygous. We look at that as the freeways. And if you have no copies and you have full functioning, you have 8 lanes of highway. And if you have one copy, you have 4 lanes. And if you have 2 copies, you have 2 lanes. But we say it's the cars on the highway that really can make an 8-lane highway, no copies, a problem as well. And that's where the environment really comes in with the thyroid, because the thyroid really in Latin is known as the protective shield. So if we have exposures to chemicals and radiation and toxins, your thyroid is going to increase its metabolic activity. Potentially it can become the immune target. And then we've turned on the the combination of genes that all together as an assembly line of workers didn't produce the widget optimally, and now you have turned on the expression and your methylation has really taken a back seat. And that's where MTHFR comes in, because MTHFR is one of the major steps in methylating, in producing the widget, in being able to produce ATP in order for your thyroid to not become an immune attacking site. So it's a lot of intricacies in here, and it's very, very complicated. The next thing that we look at is there optimal amounts of tyrosine, which is the main amino acid for producing T4. And again, we could look at your genetic type for this, because if you are an overstimulator or an understimulator, you may not have enough tyrosine to be able to produce your neurotransmitters, which impacts the original production of the thyroid, which is the hypothalamus and the serotonin and dopamine. So there's lots of circles in here. Is there proper thyroid binding globulin attachment? So once, let's say your hypothalamus is getting proper signals, it's going to the pituitary is also giving proper signals, then it goes to the thyroid and has TPO activity that produces T4 and T3. Iodine is in efficient amounts and sufficient amounts. Tyrosine is in sufficient amounts. Now it has to be transported to the different parts of the body that can now convert the inactive T4 into the active T3. And we have a deiodinase enzyme that does that peripherally in the liver, in the peripheral tissues, in the GI tract. So that has to be working well as well. And then we have to have proper, this is a really important one, sulfation and acetylation. So these are all scientific terms, but it's one of the major important factors that once you have transported that thyroid hormone that has been produced by the thyroid centrally into the periphery, a lot of that tissue is inactive, or it's not available, it's not able to be utilized. So 20% of that conversion takes place in the GI tract, and we need to have proper acetylation and proper sulfation. Those are 2 methylation dependent nutrients or processes that needs to be happening. So if MTHFR is homozygous, it's going to impact your acetylation, which is going to impact your conversion of your inactive hormone to your active hormone. So it's really important to understand that genetic component. Acetylation, we see this a lot in the hormone imbalance type, or the weak cellular type, where you're not producing enough energy, you're not able to use ATP, you're not able to burn protein, carbs, and fats, and MTHFR can play a major role in your ability to shuttle protein and fat into the cell for energy, which then shuts down your thyroid. So these are vicious cycles that can really be impactful. The next thing that we see is the proper receptor site sensitivity. And receptor site sensitivity has to do with your ability to repair your receptor sites. And that has a lot to do with MTHFR, with your phospholipids. You need to be able to make phospholipids, which 60 to 80% of methylation activity goes to repair your cell membranes, which are made through phospholipids. And if your methylation is depleted, or you are majorly inhibited with your ability to repair your cell membranes, then all of these things could be going well. You could be producing thyroid hormone, you could be signaling it, you can transport it, you can convert it, but then it doesn't get into the cell, and you're yelling at that deaf person louder by getting the hormones exogenously through your medication, and it's not getting into the cell. It's like insulin resistance, where insulin can't get into the cell because there's no receptor sites. You've been yelling at that person for so long, and those, what we call peroxidation, inflammation, your inability to clear out chemicals and toxins, which would be a toxic accumulator, doesn't allow you to be able to repair your cell membranes so that the receptor sites are binding the hormone that you're working so hard to get to the cell, to get to the touchdown, to get to the end zone. And that's why your genetic type is really important, because when you take the test and you learn what your genetic susceptibilities are by looking at the questions that most resemble you, you may have a couple of these genetic susceptibilities. Then what we do is we have your genetic type unlocked course, where you now know, okay, if I'm a toxic accumulator, I know that my sulfation is going to be a problem. I know that I might not be able to make a glutathione effectively. These are the gene SNPs that I need to look on my report. We create that for you. Or these are the tests that you need to be able to do to verify if this is the problem. And then these are the supplements and nutritional strategies that we recommend that you do to fix that. Now, I'm going to put a really good analogy in there. The analogy, which people who know me, I use this analogy a lot. And I look at the definition of less is more as the way to fix things. Or a better way is I use the analogy of the Karate Kid who's waxing on and waxing off and waxing on and waxing off and doing all of Mr. Miyagi's chores. And he starts to get upset and he says, you know, this is BS. Like, when are you going to start to take me to fight? And, you know, all you have me doing is cleaning up and doing all your chores. And then, you know, Mr. Miyagi, as you guys know, throws the punch, wax on, wax off, wax on, wax off, and, you know, stroke up. Or what was the one where he does up and then down? I don't remember what that one was. But anyways, he learned that he was equipped to fight, and he hadn't actually gone into the ring. What does that have to do with anything that I'm talking about? Well, if we understand the 10 mechanisms from your serotonin and dopamine metabolism and how that impacts your hypothalamus, your pituitary response, so that once it gets the messages, it can signal to the thyroid, your TPO antibody response, so that you can actually produce T4 and T3, how your body uses iodine and tyrosine so that you can make an effective hormone, how that is transported in the body from the thyroid to the conversion sites like your liver, your gastrointestinal tract, your peripheral tissue, how your 5-deadenase enzyme is working, how you're able to use sulfation and acetylation to be able to convert to the active hormone, how you're able to get that receptor site working properly. And then last, how are you able to get, once it's in the cell, how are you able to get that proteomic expression, which means once you get it in there, is it being triggered to create ATP? And those are the 10 mechanisms that we recommend looking into in terms of where is the processes breaking down, how is that related to your genetic type, so that we can understand the specific supporting nutrients, dietary habits, removal of supplements, best testing practices, so that now we can wax on and wax off without specifically giving you thyroid medication. And then all of a sudden you start realizing you already know how to fight. You feel more energetic, you feel more metabolic activity, the weight loss is coming on, or even the weight is coming back on. Your brain is synapsing, responding to stressors. You don't feel cold all the time. You have better skin. Your hair is not falling out. And this is what it takes. I mean, hopefully this made a lot of sense to you guys. So we missed Dr. John Thomas, that's for sure, because I would have loved to hear his spin on this. Every time I hear that guy talk, I learn more and more. I always tell Dr. Thomas, I say, it's like I'm a caveman and you just show me fire. And I was like, well, where have I been for so many centuries when all you need to do is rub two sticks together and create fire? And I'm, you know, in the cold here. But hopefully you got a lot of value out of that. What I want you to do at this point is I want you to go to yourgenetictype.com, log into the free resource where you can get your 7 genetic type mini course, and then really think about getting the unlocked course. It's only $97. And like I said, it walks you through what your genetic type is. If you have your genetic test, you'll be able to see the specific gene SNPs that represent the different 7 types, and you may be a combination of those types. And then what are the best tests that you should do to confirm this? What are the best supplements you should be doing? And most importantly, what are the best supplements you shouldn't be doing? What's the best dietary recommendations? And you can get the test on our sites now. We're ultimately going to have some supplements that you can be getting and private labeling as well. And then the most important thing is when you purchase that $97 course, Dr. Thomas and I are starting our membership site content this month. So we'll be doing 2 specific done for you recordings for our members. And then what it's going to be is it's going to be case studies. So Dr. Thomas will pick a case study and I'll pick a case study, and we'll go through, hey, these were your genetic SNPs that this client had. He or she presented with this, that, or the other. These were the specific tests that we recommended. These were the results of the test. These were the implementation strategies. These were the supplements they were taking. These were the supplements we took them off. These were the supplements we put them on. Here's what the follow-up tests were, and here's their testimonial for getting better. So that's going to be really invaluable to be able to look over our shoulder and be able to have that membership component along with your genetic type and unlocking the mystery of your chronic health problem. So hopefully I gave you another way to think about your genetic type and how it relates to MTHFR and how it relates to your thyroid challenges. My name is Dr. Joel Rosen, and on behalf of Dr. John Thomas and myself, we are really excited to help unlock the genetic mystery and end your chronic health problem nightmare. So hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Take care and have an awesome day.